If you don't know us, we are the Ulrichs, and we survived a kind of dramatic event. Well, let's go all the way back to the summer of 2017.
It was a good summer.
It was a great summer. We had a great family vacation. We went all through northern Michigan, the Upper Peninsula, with a camper.
Yep.
And we took our kids on this kind of 2-week camping tour of the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. We went to Pictured Rocks and to Quamanon Falls and Oswald's Bear Ranch.
We had 3 very active kids and with wild imaginations. They just wanted to be outside playing all the time. And it was a lot for me as a mom because I remember thinking, they're going to run too far away, you know?
Yeah. How do we keep Dietrich, who's so active at 4 years old, safe when we're out camping and all this?
On that whole vacation, and believe me, he's all boy, 100% boy, and there's nothing wrong with that boy. We were worried about him jumping off the waterfalls.
It was a really great screen-free adventure for our family.
Which I love that.
Yeah.
I love screen-free time. It's really
Yeah,
funny.
we were at that stage a really great, happy family. We're at a good spot in our careers, and our kids are doing really well. Everybody's healthy and thriving, and we had just bought our dream home.
So I remember calling a bunch of my friends and asking them if it was normal because Dietrich was our first son, and I remember asking them if it was normal for him to be sweating and drenching the bed at night, and that was new for us after we moved into the house, and then he would be really tired during the day. So we moved in August. He started preschool in September, and he couldn't even hardly make it to go to preschool to wake up in the morning because he was so tired. And I just assumed he was sweating, so I didn't know if it was hormonal or what was happening. And they all were kind of like, well, kind of normal, kind of not. And I'm talking like drenched sweat. And so I thought it was weird. I kind of just waited a week or so, and then I called Dr. John.
So night sweats is a pretty unusual thing, and I look at his age and it's like, he's only 4 years old. And so my brain's immediately going, this is not your standard ear infection, sore throat, that kind of stuff. And so I go in with the medical student and, just start taking a history. And I immediately knew, even before I walked in the door, that there was something out of the ordinary.
And I just said, this is what's happening. And he had another symptom too that was kind of odd. And we were looking into what it could possibly be. And I just noticed he was getting more tired and more weak. And the sweating became something that happened throughout the day, every single day. He was not sleeping well at night, and neither was I. And so I'm getting more and more worried watching him. And he wasn't playing. Part of the reason we moved into a bigger house is because he would run non-stop around the house.
Always moving.
We're always tripping over him. He's just so active.
He's always jumping off of stuff. Very active, wouldn't stop when you moved in here.
He was just the most active kid. And mysteriously, we move into this house.
And a few weeks later, he can't even get up the energy to go to preschool for 3 hours.
He's slowing down. He starts drenching his clothes, first his pajamas, then his clothes in sweat. I mean, 4-5 times a day. It looks like he jumped in a pool. He's so wet with sweat.
And he would just say, he would feel it coming, say the sweat's coming, he would take off his clothes, and then he would go jump in the shower and curl up in the fetal position. It was so bizarre.
He was just becoming more and more
Lethargic.
Yeah. So he had a sore here from always laying like this. So his face was all chapped, and he'd shake, constantly shaking his feet and stuff. And
Then he'd jump up and
get
want to take a shower because that's the only thing that soothed him. He would take,
how many a day?
7 or 8 showers a day.
Day and night.
All night long, just to soothe whatever.
First order of business, I got to rule out the bad things. So I sent you for lab work. So Dietrich got a set of labs that day.
And then nothing came back. And then he started having other symptoms. And so Dr. John went to the next level, and he did this whole other slew of like the next things that you would eliminate.
After I ruled out leukemia and lymphoma, and I had that moment, and I got to call Jamie with that good news, I was like, okay, but we still have to figure out what's going on. His sympathetic nervous system is reacting too quickly. Something is setting it off. So I'm like, okay, what else can cause your sympathetic nervous system to go off? I haven't ruled out all kinds of cancers. There are 2 other types of cancers that can cause some of these symptoms. One of them is called neuroblastoma, and the other one's called a pheochromocytoma.
It goes from Dietrich's very tired to the point where Dietrich is almost inactive. And near the end, when we're really getting concerned, he starts losing weight.
For a pediatrician, your cheat sheet is their weight. If they are gaining weight, you have ruled out a lot of bad things. But as soon as they start to lose weight, you need to really change your approach. And that was it. And so his weight loss was a big red flag for me, saying, again, I have these two symptoms, now I've got a third, and he's having some clinical changes that have me worried, and I put him in the hospital. I just knew something was off. And I was like, look, I need my community of doctors to weigh in on Dietrich, and I want to do it quickly.
He spent 2 days in the hospital and we were discharged with no answers.
Right.
By the time we're in October, we're taking him to doctor's appointments. He wasn't going to preschool anymore. He couldn't go. So he's home with us every day. We're carrying him around. He's a 4-year-old active boy who used to run and jump and play and sing and dance all the time. And now we're literally carrying him. We would carry him with us through our day-to-day activities to think he lived in a stroller.
He had gone from the time I saw him jumping off rocks to the time I saw him again. You were putting him in a stroller to take him into church. He wanted to be held all the time, usually by his mom or Nana.
Like I remember I would take him with me to church. He would last for about 15 or 20 minutes, and then he'd curl up in a ball in the stroller and just scream. And I could not figure out why, but we just kept living life because we're doing all these tests in the background, trying to figure out what's wrong, watching him get worse and worse and worse, and not knowing what we're going to be able to do about it because nobody could find out what was wrong with him.
The bottom of his feet had blisters all over them, and there was just one thing after another, after another, after another, and no one knew anything.
This is the point where we're calling everybody we know that prays. And we're saying, we don't know. We're not getting any answers.
As I was praying, because the fear was that Dietrich was declining so rapidly, and if they didn't find a medical solution, what was going to happen? I mean, he's just basically moving toward death. And so during that time period, though, excuse me, I felt the Lord promise me that he was not going to die. And I held on to that there was the hope that even though it looked like very bleak and from the outside you didn't know what was going to happen, I just felt the Lord speaking to me that he was not going to die.
I kept getting back from the Lord. I mean, almost every time I prayed, there's nothing wrong with that boy. I knew it didn't look that way, and I don't know what the answer was, because it certainly looked bad.
I think we were blessed because the doctor I called had some pediatric training. I don't think she was a pediatrician, but when I explained what was going on, and I explained the whole thing, she was like, "You need an MRI today," and I was like, "Yeah, thank you very much." So it's always good when you go to bat and it goes smoothly. It doesn't always work that way. So we got that, and again, blessedly, that comes back normal.
We had the MRI. We're like, we're gonna have the answer. Like this is an MRI of his whole entire body. Because I am getting mad at God at this point. I'm just mad that we don't have an answer and we can't do anything about it. And so I remember pushing him around the stroller because just about the time, about 1 o'clock every day, he would just start crying for Bella. It was so weird. And he would just scream her name. So I would put him in the stroller because I couldn't handle it for very long, and we'd just walk around the neighborhood, and he usually fall asleep after crying a little bit. So we're walking around the neighborhood. I get the call from Dr. John, and he says the MRI is totally normal. And I just about fell on the ground. I was so mad and happy at the same time, kind of. And I got off the phone with Dr. John. I'm just like, now what? He's like, we're going to go back to the drawing board. And I said to God, like, what is going on? You know, like, what is happening? Like, how come we can't find out what's wrong? And I, you know, when God speaks to me, it's kind of like a thought in my head, or not like an audible voice or anything, but I remember as clear as anything the thought coming to my head, like, my question was, why do we have this MRI and nothing is wrong with him? And God said to me in my thoughts, I want you to see that his whole body is being protected. And I'm like, okay, but look at him. Like, he's not okay. You know, there's something wrong. But at that point, I had seen every single one of his organs. I had seen his spine, his brain, like everything was okay. I remember hanging on to like that little tiny piece of faith throughout this whole journey when we found out what was wrong.
But he was really in trouble. And I could tell that. We weren't here at the time. I could tell that by talking to everybody and all what was going on. It wasn't just him, though. It was Bella was having trouble, too.
After we moved into the house, too, we noticed Arabella, who is larger-than-life personality. She's always been, she loves to perform, she loves to lead, she loves to plan things. She's always gathering people in the neighborhood.
She's becoming shy and paranoid and fearful.
I remember one time we were all outside, like hanging out with neighbors, and I went to find her because she wasn't outside. And I'm like, Bella, are you gonna come outside? She was downstairs in the basement crying on the floor by herself in the dark. And I'm like, honey, what are you doing? She's like, I just want to stay here by myself. And that I had never seen her do something like that before.
And then Bella too, like in children's church, she'd lay on the floor in a fetal position, just in pain. And that's not Bella at all. It was just terrifying.
She started complaining about just mystery pain. Mm-hmm. And it was the kind of thing where it doesn't make any sense. It's like, what do you mean your whole body hurts or your legs hurt?
Like I'd meet them at the bus and I'm like, let's go for a bike ride. And she would just bend over, you know how she did, and just in terrible pain. And I'm like, come on, Bella, just push through that. You'll be all right. Must be growing pains. And she's like, Grandma, you don't understand. I can't.
In the middle of the night, I'd wake up with her leaning over the bed, screaming in my face in pain. And this is after anything I could give her over the counter, like Benadryl, Tylenol, Motrin, like anything I could give her.
And she's unconsolable. We're like, but honey, I can see nothing's hurt on your body. And so we begin trying to go to take her to doctors to try and figure out. They're now doing independent workups of these two kids.
With very, very different symptoms.
The symptoms are different.
So she came home one day, we took her to see our family counselor. And I remember her coming home saying, I don't want to take any medication anymore. I think my feelings pain is making my other pain worse. And it broke my heart, but then later on when we found out there was really something wrong, it was a relief, but I think she was also angry.
Right.
Because she felt crazy, you know?
Well, and she felt crazy, and when we get to the bottom of the mystery, what's happening to her is making her crazy.
Right. And then later on, Paige, who actually was quite introverted at our old house and kind of hung out in Bella's shadow and just was, the little sister, was so frustrated with how sick her brother and sister were. They were always mean to her. They would yell at her and
they were so mean to Paige.
They were so negative. And Paige is just like, I'm going to go make some friends. So she became friends with all the neighborhood kids and was forced to become an extrovert because she didn't have her big sister to do it for her. But she too was complaining of headaches and neck pain.
Our pediatrician is so concerned at this time, and we love our pediatrician so much. He's so tuned in. He's on like family vacation, and he's texting and calling us from vacation in the middle of the night saying, oh wait, could it be this? Could it be that? His wife is yelling at him on vacation, like, just go home.
Right.
And he was so determined to help this boy.
And I remember looking at you saying, I am going to figure this out, or I'm going to find somebody who will. And I made that promise, and that's what you do. You just go through it. And
at some point during all this testing, this conversation starts about toxicology. And where it starts, I remembered being a little defensive, because where it starts is someone poisoning him? Mm-hmm. So we're trying to look at, okay, places he goes. He sees people at church. He sees people at preschool. He sees
Grandma and
Grandpa's house. So how weird is
Consistent babysitters. He goes to work out with us.
Because it would have to be something consistent.
Right.
This couldn't be something that was a one time he got into somebody's pills. It has to be something that somebody's deliberately doing over months. And so we're looking at now, with a little bit of suspicion for a minute, like, people that love and care for us. Could somebody be evil and doing something wrong? And I remember kind of thinking, oh my God, they're thinking that about us. Mm-hmm. Like the pediatrician's thinking about that about us, and he has to be thinking that. And so we begin doing a tox screen, and at some point, our pediatrician, Dr. John, orders a heavy metals screen.
Toxicity of heavy metals is something that was just kind of drilled into me when I was a resident. And I'm thinking of Dietrich's case, and it's like, maybe. I haven't ruled it out. It's a long shot. So I said, I'm just going to send a panel of all heavy metals. And so I drew the blood, and the first thing that comes back, which is elevated, is this mercury level. So that's where we started to sniff what might be going wrong. But I didn't believe it at first. I totally was in denial.
And so he calls me and we're talking about it, and he's like, this has got to be a fluke. He's like, but anytime a toxicology result comes back positive, I have to call the Poison Control Center.
And I have absolutely no idea where the mercury's coming from, because it gets confirmed. So his urine mercury was off the charts. So we know that he's getting exposed to some type of heavy metal. And again, we have no idea where.
In the meantime, I've called the Loudoun County Health Department, and they made an appointment with us. Now, I made this phone call around the 18th or 19th, and the earliest they could come check our house was the 30th. I invite them in to sit around the counter, get them some water, and we're chatting about what's happened to us in the last few weeks. And Dietrich's slumped over on the couch in the fetal position, crying, and then he has a sweat, and I have to excuse myself, get him in the shower, get him out, bring him back out, lay him on the couch, and then we continue talking. And it's just like, this is our life.
I walk into this scene where we have like 4 or 5 health department officials sitting with my wife around our kitchen island,
telling us this is probably not it, this is just procedure.
They're like, man, we were hoping we could get answers, but now that we see this house,
right?
They're like, this house is not going to be a problem. This is a new construction home.
Have you? And then they start going through things. Have you thought of this and this?
Have
and
you
I'm
thought
like,
of this? We're sorry, we're not going to be able to give you answers. Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, I'm watching the hazmat team walk around our house with their little Ghostbusters meters, beep, 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 beep. And they keep walking in and out, and I'm sitting at the point where the guy who's doing most of the talking from the health department can't see them. I'm watching the fire marshal's team with the hazmat crew do their jobs. They keep leaving and coming back in and having these whisper conversations and coming back in, and they look concerned. And finally one of them comes out and says to this team of people around the island, he says, I'm sorry, we have to take this conversation outside. I've done readings, I've purged my meter 3 times and come back in to verify that's not the meter's problem. You have unsafe levels of mercury on every floor of this home, and it's not safe for human habitation. The fire marshal will be here momentarily. We're condemning the property. You all need to leave right now. And there's this moment of like,
and I lost it. I just started crying, and then everyone at the counter is like packing up their stuff and have shocked looks on their faces.
We need to go.
When you guys called me, it's still one of the more memorable moments in my career was Jamie calling me and saying, "You won't believe what just happened at our home." And when she told me about the elevated mercury levels, and it all starts to click into place, and I realize you guys have been living there, it's a new home, it's an exposure, there's some type of mercury in the house. One, I mean, obviously I start to worry about, okay, what's that going to mean long term for the kids? But 2, we found it. I was like, we got it after all that time. And it was one of those moments where I was like, this is why I went into medicine, because you can make a difference. So it was really, really rewarding.
This explains all the symptoms. It explains all the symptoms of Bella. It explains all the symptoms of Dietrich. This is the issue. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden, everything clicks into place and we know what's wrong. And then we're told, get out of your house. None of your possessions can leave this house. They scanned our bodies before they would let us leave. Mm-hmm. They scanned our shoes before they would let us carry our shoes out. They scanned our cars to make sure we were safe to use our cars, because they're afraid of cross-contamination. They're afraid we're going to take the toxin out of here into the community, and it's going to become a bigger problem. And I'm on the phone with the insurance company trying to figure out, okay, I need help. What do I do here? Mm-hmm. Like, I don't know how to start this. I don't know the first thing about remediation, but I need help. And the first thing my insurance company said is, I'm sorry, you're not covered for this. And I said, what? And I instantly, I lost it.
Yeah.
I was like,
The last 3 months of rage came out.
I'm lighting this poor lady up on the phone, up and down. I am like, you don't even begin to tell me I'm not covered for this. We're on the porch.
Yeah, and then the bus comes home. So the bus drops off Bella and Paige because Dietrich is home. And they see the fire trucks and the hazmat team out in front of our house, and they see us on the porch looking bewildered, I'm
with
sure.
the dog tied to a tree.
And the girls are running in towards us, and they're saying, "What's wrong?" And Bella made eye contact with me, and she said, "This is what's wrong." And I said, "Yes, Bella." And I told her our house is poisoned with mercury, of all things. And
she said,
like,
"I knew it.
I knew something was wrong.
I knew something was wrong with me. I'm not crazy."
And all the neighbors are like standing around in front of our house because our bus stop, you can see our house from the bus stop.
That next morning, we're trying to figure out, okay, what do we do? Like, all right, now what's the plan? We have no possessions. We have no home. We have very sick kids still, very, very sick. We're not in a good place. At this point, friends were offering us to come stay with them.
Basements and like their guest rooms, and it was so kind. So many people offered to
so
let us
beautiful.
stay with them and move into their houses.
We were bad guests. We were not going to be good. Our kids are screaming all night long.
It felt like a pediatric psychiatric ward or something. It was
It
just
was
not
good.
great.
I'm like, we can't do this. We don't have the money to be in a hotel. We're trying to figure out what to do. And Jamie and I talked, and we said, okay, this is going to be a long crisis. We don't know where this ends, but it's going to be a long time. Let me focus on getting us a home. You get us healthy. And she says, okay. So Jamie's going to work with Dr. John to get the kids healthy because there's a treatment that's involved there.
Thank goodness.
An unpleasant one.
Yeah.
I'm going to go work on our material situation. Like, okay, what needs to happen? Can we find some money? And how do we walk out of this?
Yeah. We were fortunate enough to find one of the only toxicologists on the East Coast, Dr. Johnson Arbor, and she's out of Georgetown University.
My name is Dr. Kelly Johnson Arbor. I'm the medical director at National Capital Poison Center, and I'm also a medical toxicologist at MedStar Georgetown University Hospital in Washington, D.C.
She saw us immediately. She was amazing. She helped us. She worked really closely with Dr. John.
Once I spoke with her and was able to sort of figure out that this was a real poisoning, I wanted to see her kids right away.
And she just loved our family so well. She gave me her cell phone number so I could ask her crazy mom questions in the middle of the night if I had them, and I still do the same thing even though my kids are fine. Yeah. But she was an answer to prayer. She's just a gem, and I love her so much.
And I just remember thinking to myself, I've never seen anything like this. These poor children are so badly affected by mercury.
I remembered when we first met with Dr. Johnson Arbor, she was kind of smiley, and we were so wound up and stressed out. And she said, this is really insensitive, but I'm going to tell it to you anyway. This is a toxicologist's dream. She's like, so much of my job is telling people that are paranoid they've not been poisoned. And she's like, I have a whole family and you've all been poisoned. And we were like...
We're looking at each other like, okay.
I'm like, all right, lady. And we just ended up loving her.
Yeah. The kids had to, for 19 days, take oral chelation because their levels were so high. And what it does is it pulls the poisons and the toxins from the body quicker than your body would normally excrete it through the kidneys itself.
So when people are poisoned with heavy metals, the most important thing to do, whether it's arsenic or mercury or lead or whatever metal, is to get away from the source of exposure. So in this case, we had to really figure out where the mercury was coming from, because if you don't get away from that source, you're going to keep being poisoned by it.
And then we went ahead and moved in with my parents, who were gracious enough to help us and take turns and shifts, and really just, we couldn't have done it without them.
That season, someone needs to sleep with Bella, someone needs to sleep with Dee. They're just nuts. They're just requiring constant care. They're screaming at night. They're having like psychotic dreams. And Dietrich is sweating,
and his
hands
would
and feet
itch
are peeling.
and peel all night long, so he'd be doing this with his feet all night long, moaning and then screaming.
And his mouth
and there's
has
nothing
sores on
you
it.
can do about it.
His bottom has sores on it.
So we literally like go to work, come back to my mom's house after we get the kids, eat dinner, say goodnight and go to opposite beds. Like,
Yeah.
we hardly ever saw each other. It was so
Well, we
awful.
it was like high five. And we were like,
Give report.
Yeah, we were like, what's going on with the house? This is what's going on with the house. What's going on with the medicine? This is what's going on with the medicine. I love
night.
you. I love you. I got Bella. You got D. Okay, let's go.
And I'd be like, no, please, can I have Bella tonight?
It was like whoever drew the short straw got D, because D was so much work.
neat.
Elemental mercury can cause emotional lability. If you've heard of the term mad as a hatter, so the term mad as a hatter actually comes from a town in Connecticut called Derby, and there were in the 1800s a bunch of people that were making hats there, and they would use inorganic mercury as part of the felting process for the hats. And because of they were basically being continuously exposed to inorganic mercury, and they were all very just odd acting, and so that's where the term mad as a hatter comes from. When we think of people who are exposed to elemental or inorganic mercury, we think that they can just have these neuropsychological changes. So they're not just sort of feeling tired for the most part, especially in kids. I've had adults feel tired, but in kids they can become very just antsy and angry and kind of flip back and forth, like you flip a switch and they're crying. The rash that we see in children, we don't see it in adults. It's pretty much a hypersensitivity to the mercury ion that we only see in kids. And that rash is usually on the hands and the feet, on basically the really distal, the tips of the extremities. And it's pink, and it's called erythism or pink disease. So those are the things that I was looking for, but definitely the behaviors of the kids, specifically Bella and Dietrich and Paige just sort of intermittently crying for no reason. That was just like completely characteristic for me, that these kids were exposed to a significant amount of mercury.
So that's kind of, I was dealing with that world while you were dealing with trying to get the house right.
So if the fire department was to hand you a correction order to remedy a chemical spill, you don't even understand what it means, what would you do? Like, who's your next call? Like, how does homeowner Joe, who happens to be a pastor, like remedy a chemical spill? I don't even know how to start. So I started with where the fire department told me to go, which was this list of like chemical remediation companies. They pointed me to this company called AEG in Maryland. And so I call AEG in Maryland after a frustrating day of other phone calls. And I eventually get the president of the company. He says, I'll be there in the morning. So he drove down from Maryland and met me at our house. He cracks the seal on the door. He takes his little meters with this little thing called the Jerome, like vapor analyzer. It looks like a Ghostbusters machine. And he's taking notes the whole time. And he and I walk through this whole house, and he does readings in every room. And he eventually gets to the basement, and the fire department had told us that the workroom area of the basement was the hottest zone for mercury vapor. They had said, we think we found a definitive spill site in the basement workroom because of the readings that are there. He gets down with a flashlight, and he's showing me beaded droplets of mercury on that floor. We found other spots of beaded mercury throughout the house, like in the floor, in between the floorboards of our wood floor and our kitchen. We found beads of mercury. And we're trying to figure out what the heck, like, where is this coming from? We own no devices that contain mercury. We don't have any mercury in our lives. It's not like a thing that people have. They found a definitive spill site. So during remediation, they found little bits of broken glass with red grade marks on it. And they said they recovered about 230 grams of raw elemental mercury from the basement floor at this spill site. And we found out that the previous homeowner used to be a chemist. And so now you start going down this road of, okay, well, the average person might not have access to this chemical, but a chemist, he could have access in ways that the average person wouldn't. Then Tom went into the kids' bedrooms, and he did the scans on the kids' bedrooms. And he's shaking his head. He scanned Dietrich's and Bella's pillows, and they're coming back hot. They're bedding on their blankets, their mattresses. They're coming back hot. He said, whoever was sleeping in that first bedroom and that third bedroom, those two kids are sick. And I said, yes. And he said, the kid in the second bedroom is not as sick. And I said, yeah, how do you know that? And he said, it's your vents. We're like, what? He said there's a spill site on that concrete floor where there's a lot of beaded mercury on that floor. There's walk-off distribution throughout your house just because it gets on your shoes and it goes where people go. But most of the mercury is being deposited when you leave the concrete floor and it goes to carpet outside of that storage room door where the air intake is for your house. And so you have a pool of mercury underneath that carpet, and where the air intake is for that house, if your HVAC system, it's sucking mercury vapor in and spreading it through your home as vaporized mercury. That's what's poisoning your family. And I'm like, oh my God. I'm thinking back to all those times where we put Dietrich, his health is declining, and he's staying in bed. And Bella...
making her go back to sleep in her room.
Go back to bed. You know, and
she can't sleep in our room for the rest of her life. Like,
it is the room.
And they
it
kept
is their
telling
beds.
us, they both told us, I can't
sleep in my bed. They kept saying that.
And
I can't sleep in my bed. We're thinking, oh my God, well, why not? Why can't you sleep? My legs hurt when I sleep in my bed. Mm-hmm. It's because you're breathing vaporized mercury all night long. Mm-hmm. And I am like, oh, my heart is breaking. Mm-hmm. Paige's vents in her room were closed.
She's always hot.
The other significant detail is that we hadn't been running the heat in our house. We moved in August, mm-hmm. and we had the air on. The air conditioning was running, not the heat. And he said that's really fortunate because this is October, November time frame, and it got really cold. And he said if you had turned the heat on, heat makes mercury vapors exponentially more dangerous and more toxic. And if we had turned that heat on, it's sucking it into our HVAC system, and it would have been raining like death onto our family. And as sick as Dietrich was, we got kicked out of our house on October 30th, the night before Halloween. It was a freezing cold Halloween that year.
It was frost the next morning.
We would have turned the heat on, and it might be that we got kicked out of the house the night before we might have killed Dee by turning the heat on, and we wouldn't have known. Mm-hmm. We wouldn't have known why. So I have this conversation with Tom from AEG on my porch, and he says, okay, I think I can do this. All of your possessions are going to be contaminated. I think I can clean this house. Justin, I'll make you this promise. If my company does this, this house will be safe. He said, I will not let those kids in this house until I know it's safe for them. I won't let them in during the work. I won't let them in after it's done until I'm sure those kids are safe. He was very emotional about the fact he's looking at the pictures of the kids in their rooms. He was ticked off, and he was emotional about it. And he said, I will not let those kids in this house until it's safe. So I wrote a check for 10 grand, which was all the money we had. And I said, clean the house. I said to Jamie, I just zeroed out our savings account. And then he said, well, I'll need the rest when we're done. And I said, well, how long? And he said, well, probably 10 to 15 days. I said, you'll have it.
Wasn't it like 5 days?
He said, you're lying. And I said, yep. He said, okay, just as long as we're clear. And I said, I don't know what to tell you. I'll have it. I don't know. Which leads us into this next part of the story is like, how are we going to pay for this?
Right.
Where do you go for an unplanned 75 grand? Two things happened. One, we had a friend of ours start a GoFundMe campaign, and it took off online. And very, very quickly, significant donations came into this GoFundMe. By the time it was over $50,000 came through a GoFundMe campaign.
In less than a month.
And I cannot begin to tell you how significant this was. Over and over and over again, we were at $0 again, and a bill comes. And for some reason, the bills were always $3,000 or $5,000, mostly $3,000. Like, if you're wondering what something costs in this weird space of medical mercury toxicology, it's $3 grand. Everything costs $3 grand. And I'm like, here's another $3,000 bill. How are we going to pay for this? And we would pray. We would end the night praying, okay, Jesus, you haven't let us down yet. Show us how you're going to do this, because we got nothing left. And in the morning,
We'd have
from strangers, there'd be $3,000. And overnight, our GoFundMe would increase or whatever. There was one point where I was at work. In the door came a coworker with an envelope. At the moment where I threw up my hands and said, God, I don't have the money again. You got to do something here. And like in that minute, someone came through the door and put an envelope on my desk. And I said, "What's in the envelope?" And he said, $3,200. And I said, "Where did it come from?" And he said, "Jesus knows, and I get to know, and that's really fun. But you're never going to know." And I just am like, well, you tell Jesus and whoever sent this money, that's exactly the number I needed right now. And I can't even begin to tell you how miraculous this is. Mm-hmm. It happened like a dozen times. It really did happen that often. Mm-hmm. We happened so many times we were just blown away. And I can't begin to tell you of the value of a community that rallied around us in our moment of great need. Mm-hmm. You never want to be in a position where you're the one that needs help. Mm-hmm. And no one likes to be there. But
we've gotten really good at it.
We've gotten really good at it. And dear God, was it so needed.
Yeah.
And people helped us, and we got to a point where we just received the help with humility and grace and said thank you. And it was the most beautiful thing.
I had a friend come over one day, bring me this little plaque that said faith is stronger than fear. And for whatever reason, that was like the perfect moment, the perfect timing. God knew I needed to hear that and gave me the strength to move back into a house that I felt like was had betrayed us. And honestly, like, I'm pretty extroverted, and since we've moved back, I love being at home. I love being here.
It was an amazing story of God rescuing us. I can't believe how dependent we were on the expertise of other people through this whole thing. And it was so God sent that we had these right people there.
And that's what it is. I mean, I think it's a story of community when you think about it. I needed my community of physicians tell me what it wasn't. I feel like, the community that taught me got us to the diagnosis, and then I needed a whole different community that I had never used before to help treat you guys.
We decided we're going to move back in the house, and December 1st was the thing. And so we had my mom and dad in town and her mom and dad here, and we had our kids. And we took them all into the home, and a lot of the renovations had been done, and everything is ready to we're going to move back in. And we wanted to reclaim the space.
We would spend the time just going room to room and blessing that room and cursing anything that was in it that wasn't supposed to be there, and blessing it with the power of the Holy Spirit. And it was a great, awesome night.
And we had a really good old-fashioned prayer meeting in this house, and we walked through every room, and we prayed over every room, and we walked through with the kids, and we wanted to have the kids a part of this. And at this point, Dietrich's not even really recovered yet. Dietrich's not really moving. We're still carrying Dee around, but Bella and Paige got to do that. It's been 2 years since all this. Our kids are healthy. We're looking at no long-term effects. Our house is beautiful. It's a home.
And we get to use it to serve other people and gather friends and have a lot of fun. Which is why we wanted to move into it in the first place.
Yep. And we're determined to do it. I'm so proud of our kids and the courage they showed. I'm so proud of my wife and you had such a tenacity during that season of, it sucked.
It was terrible.
And you were like, you know what though? I'm going to cling to my family and I'm going to cling to my faith, and we're going to get through this. And it was really good to have a community of people around us during that time.
And I'm thankful for the way that you just kept chasing stuff down too. It was really frustrating. I feel like we had a lot of dead ends along the way, and somehow to overcome that and still not kill each other, that's a big win.
Yes. We were praying about big things, about what's next for our family. And we were going to start a church. And on the very spot where this mercury was spilled was where I was kneeling down in the carpet praying about what's next and dreaming about what is now Terraform a Church. And that's not lost on me. It's not lost on me that on the spot where I really feel like the enemy meant to unleash death and destruction, we have unleashed a movement of life and hope and love that people are finding and discovering the beauty of the kingdom of God. And it's really become part of our family's story of redemption. So we don't wish this kind of thing on anybody.
No.
But if you had to go through it, we hope you have good friends.
So thank you for supporting us, and
thank you
for just loving us through a crazy time. And it's our hope and prayer that you will receive that same love back at some point in your life.